November 1944, Northern France. Inside a stone farmhouse converted into Third Army's forward command post, 12 American officers stood at attention waiting for General George S. Patton to walk through the door. The room smelled of wet wool and burnt coffee. Rain ticked against the slate roof. On the long oak table lay a single brown folder, sealed, stamped, top secret orders, pending signature. The man it concerned was already in the room. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Ray, 38 years old, born in Indianapolis, son of a Pullman porter, was the only black officer present. His tanker's jacket was clean. His boots had been polished twice that morning. He was about to be told whether the United States Army would let him do what he had spent 15 years preparing for, or whether it would quietly take it back. The major to his left would not look at him. Major Charles Henderson, white, West Point class of 1932, North Africa and Sicily on his record, was a competent officer with one fixed conviction. 10 minutes earlier in the corridor, when an aide mentioned what was inside the folder, Henderson had said it out loud where Ray could hear him. "Sir, with respect, the men won't follow him. Not into a real fight. Not with the lives that are on that table." He had meant the staff officers in the room. He had also meant the 4,000 soldiers waiting in the field outside. Then word came that Patton was within the hour, and then the room widened. Other commanders began arriving: colonels, a brigadier, 2 regimental staff. By the time the door at the end of the room opened, 20 officers were standing along the walls. Every one of them knew what was about to be decided. Every one of them was waiting to see whether Patton would sign the orders in front of all of them, or pull Ray aside and quietly make him disappear. What Patton said when he walked into that room would either confirm everything the most aggressive general in the European theater had ever stood for, or it would tell every black soldier in his command exactly where they stood. We tell the World War II stories where the hardest decisions weren't made on the battlefield. They were made in the rooms where men decided who got to fight. If you want the moments the textbooks left out, subscribe. By the autumn of 1944, the United States Army had been segregated for 168 years. Black soldiers cooked, they drove trucks, they dug graves. They unloaded ships at Cherbourg and Le Havre. The Army's official position, repeated by generals and senators since the First World War, was that Negro troops were unsuitable for armored combat. They were said to lack mechanical aptitude. They were said to lack initiative under fire. Patton had publicly disagreed with that position once, in private with Eisenhower, and once on paper, in a memo that had been quietly filed and forgotten. Then, in October, the 761st Tank Battalion, the first all-black armored unit in American history, was assigned to his Third Army. Patton had asked for them. He needed armor, and he needed it now. And he had told Washington he didn't care what color the hands on the controls were, as long as they could shoot straight. The 761st had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Marcus Ray had been pulled from his artillery command and assigned to lead a combined task force built around them. He was still capable of disbelief, and that was the part of him that Major Henderson was about to test. Patton's reputation arrived in the room before he did. The officers along the wall were thinking about Sicily. They were thinking about the slap. They were thinking about a general who had broken his own army's rules so often that he had been demoted, restored, and demoted again, and who still answered to no man in the field but Eisenhower. They were thinking about a general who carried 2 ivory-handled revolvers and quoted Caesar in the mess hall. None of them knew which Patton was about to come through the door, the one who burned officers down in front of their men, or the one who could be talked out of a decision by anybody with enough nerve to push. The colonel from the 26th Infantry checked his watch. The brigadier shifted his weight. Marcus Ray watched the door. The door opened hard. Patton walked in fast, the way he always did, with his helmet under his left arm and the ivory grip of his revolver visible at his hip. He took one look at the room, at the 20 men standing, at the folder on the table, and he understood immediately what was happening. He did not sit down. "Gentlemen," he said, "I assume someone has an objection." Silence. Patton looked at the row of faces. "I have not got all day. If there's a problem with the orders I signed yesterday, I want to hear it now. From whoever it is, out loud, with his name on it." Henderson stepped forward. To his credit, he did not flinch. "Sir, with respect, Colonel Ray is a fine artillery officer. but he is being given operational command over white troops in a combined armored push. The chain of command will not function. The men will not follow. And when the bullets start flying, the moment of hesitation that costs us casualties will be on this army's hands." He paused. "Sir, I am not speaking about the colonel. I am speaking about reality." Patton looked at him for a long second. He did not speak. Henderson, taking the silence as permission, continued. "I have served with these soldiers. I know what they will and will not accept. Sending a Negro officer to lead them into a fight is not a question of fairness. It is a question of whether they come back." Ray did not move. He had been waiting 15 years for that exact sentence to be said out loud in a room with him in it, and now that it had been, he found that he had nothing to say. His hands were at his sides. His eyes were on the folder. The room was waiting for Patton. Patton walked to the table. He picked up the folder. He did not open it. He looked at Henderson, and then he looked at the rest of the officers along the wall, and what he said next was so quiet that the men in the back of the room had to lean forward to hear it. "Major, I have been in this army for 35 years. I have watched a great many soldiers die. Not one of them ever stopped to ask the color of the man who was trying to save him." He paused. Colonel Ray was at Fort Sill when half this room was still at the academy. He has commanded artillery in 2 campaigns. He is the most qualified officer for this command. And if there is a man under my flag who will not follow him into combat, that man is not refusing a Negro. That man is refusing an order from me. The folder was still closed in his hand. Is there anyone in this room who would like to refuse an order from me? No one moved. Henderson's mouth opened once and closed. A captain in the back of the room dropped his eyes to the floor and did not lift them. The colonel from the 26th Infantry, who had been about to speak, closed his hand and looked at the wall. Patton waited. He waited long enough for the silence to become a verdict. Outside, the rain kept falling. A radio in the next room hissed and then went quiet. Somewhere a dog barked twice and stopped. Nobody in that farmhouse breathed. Patton's eyes moved back to Henderson. "Major, do you have anything else you would like to say to your colonel?" Henderson swallowed once. "No, sir." Patton waited. "I would suggest, Major, that you address him as Colonel Ray from this point forward, loud enough for the room to hear it." Henderson turned a quarter turn. His face was the color of new brick. "Colonel Ray," he said, "I will follow your orders." Ray did not look at him. He looked at Patton. Then Patton turned to Ray. "Colonel, you have your command. You will move tomorrow morning at 0400. You will take the bridges at Morville-les-Vic, and you will hold them until the infantry comes through behind you. Are these orders clear?" Ray's voice was steady. "Yes, sir." Patton handed him the folder. "Then I will see you on the other side of those bridges." Marcus Ray walked out of that farmhouse with the folder under his arm and a column of officers behind him who would not look at his face. Outside, in the cold November rain, the tanks of his task force were already being fueled. The smell of diesel hung over the field. Mechanics moved between hulls with armfuls of belted ammunition. Sergeant Major Earl Pollard, a black non-commissioned officer who had served in the Army since 1923, was waiting by the lead tank with his helmet in his hand. He saluted. "Sir." Ray returned the salute. He did not speak yet. He could not yet. Pollard looked at the folder under his arm. He looked at Ray's face. He said quietly, "Did he sign it, sir?" Ray nodded once. Pollard exhaled and put his helmet on. "Then we move, sir." Ray climbed onto the turret of the lead Sherman and stood there in the rain for a long moment, looking out across the field at the men he was about to lead. Black tankers, white infantry, mechanics, drivers, gunners, all of them turned toward him, all of them waiting. Then he gave the order to move. The push began at 0400. The bridges at Morville-les-Vic were defended by elements of the 11th Panzer Division, the same German unit that had bled the Third Army through Lorraine for 2 months. The morning was black, and the road was iced over, and the lead Sherman threw a track in the first half-mile and had to be abandoned. Ray's task force ran into machine gun nests and an anti-tank battery in the first kilometer. 3 Shermans were knocked out before the sun came up. The crew of the second tank, all 4 of them black, burned alive inside the turret. A young white private from Pennsylvania named Adams was hit in the thigh as he tried to drag a wounded crewman from another burning hull. Ray went forward on foot under fire and pulled both of them back into a drainage ditch. He was the senior officer in the field. He had no business being where the bullets were. He went anyway. He was hit in the left arm by a piece of shrapnel from an exploding round, and he did not stop. He commanded the rest of the fight from the lead tank's turret, with his sleeve cut away and a field dressing tied around the wound. By mid-morning, his force had cleared the village. The infantry that came up behind him was a white rifle company from Tennessee. Their captain saluted Ray in the smoking square and did not say a word about the man giving him orders. By dusk, they had both bridges. 23 Americans had died. The German line in that sector had collapsed. Ray sent his casualty report up the chain personally. The report moved through division by lunch the next day, through corps by mid-afternoon. By sundown, it was on the desk of George Patton, who read it once, then read it again, then handed it to his chief of staff. "Tell them I want every name on this list confirmed by morning. And tell Colonel Ray I want to see him." Ray reported to forward command at 0600. He had not slept. There was mud on his face that had not come off. His left sleeve was stiff with dried blood. Patton looked at him across the same oak table where 2 days earlier the orders had been signed. "Colonel, the bridges are yours." Ray said nothing. Patton picked up the casualty report. 23 men, 16 of them white, 7 of them black. You went forward under fire to pull out 2 of them yourself. Did you stop, Colonel, to check the color of the man whose leg you were dragging through the mud? Ray said, "No, sir." Patton nodded. "Then there is no man in this army who has any business asking that question of you either." He stood and walked Ray to the door himself, which he had never done for an officer of Ray's rank before. At the door he paused. "Get that arm looked at, Colonel. I need you on the next bridge by Thursday." The story did not make the newspapers. The Army did not publicize what Patton had said in the farmhouse, and Patton himself never repeated it on the record. Major Henderson was reassigned to a quartermaster posting in February and did not see combat again. He retired a major. The 761st Tank Battalion went on to fight in the Battle of the Bulge, to break the Siegfried Line, to spend 183 consecutive days in combat, longer than almost any American unit of the war. 40 years later, in 1978, they would finally be awarded the Presidential Unit Citation that George Patton had recommended for them in 1945, and that the Army had quietly buried. Marcus Ray survived the war. He retired in 1966 as a brigadier general. He never spoke publicly about Henderson. He gave one interview in his life about that morning in the farmhouse in 1981 to a graduate student writing a thesis no one would read. He was asked what he remembered most about Patton. He said he remembered the folder. He said that Patton had held it in his hand the whole time he had spoken, never opened, never put down, as if to say that the orders inside were already final, and the only question was whether the men in the room had the courage to follow them. He said he had carried that folder back to his command tent that night, and that he had kept the empty envelope it had come in for the rest of his life. It was found in his desk drawer in Indianapolis after he died in 1993, folded once, with a single line in pencil on the back in his handwriting. The line read, "He did not have to say it, but he said it anyway." Would you have spoken up in that farmhouse, the way Patton did, with 20 officers waiting to see what you would choose? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more World War II stories about the moments that never made it into the textbooks, subscribe.